Welcome to Developer Roadmaps. You know those super complex websites? The ones with tons of data that's always changing, but somehow they still feel incredibly fast and responsive? Well, there's a good chance React is the magic behind the curtain. Today, we're going to lay out a foundational map for React, showing you exactly how it works and what makes it one of the most essential tools for any modern web developer. Okay, let's start with the one idea that if you get this, you'll get React. It all boils down to the simple little formula, v equals f of s. The view is a function of the state. What does that really mean? It means your UI, what the user sees, is just a direct result of your app's data. You change the data, the state, and poof, the view automatically updates to match. That's it. That's the core philosophy. So, what's the big problem React is trying to solve here? Well, if you've ever built a complex UI, you know how quickly the code can turn into a tangled mess. React's whole purpose is to make that process way more predictable and, well, manageable. It's all about breaking down these huge, complicated interfaces into smaller, independent, and reusable pieces. And those pieces, we call them components. This is the absolute fundamental building block of any React app. The best way to think about them is like custom reusable Lego bricks. Seriously. Each one is its own little self-contained piece of the UI. It's got its own logic, its own look and feel. You can make a tiny little button component, or you can build a whole page component. And it's this modularity, this ability to snap pieces together, that makes React so incredibly efficient. All right, let's set our first checkpoint on this developer journey. This is where the rubber meets the road. We're going to dive into how you actually create these components and, more importantly, how you combine them to build a real user interface from scratch. You know, what's really cool about a modern React component is just how simple it is. I mean, look at this. At its heart, it's just a JavaScript function. That's it. The only real trick is that instead of returning a number or a string, it returns this, markup. And it looks a whole lot like the HTML you already know. So that HTML-looking stuff inside JavaScript that has a name, it's called JSX. Think of it as JavaScript with superpowers. It's a special syntax that lets you describe what your UI should look like, declaratively, right there in the same file as the logic that powers it. This is a game changer because it keeps everything for a single piece of your UI all in one neat package, super easy to find and maintain. And this is where the magic really happens. JSX isn't just static, boring markup. See those curly braces? They're like a little escape hatch back into regular JavaScript. You can pop any variable, any expression right inside them, and React will render the result. This is how you take static components and breathe life into them with dynamic data. Okay, so we can display data. That's great. But what about interactivity, right? How do our components actually do things? How do they remember, say, how many times you've clicked a button? Well, that brings us to the next major milestone on our roadmap, giving our components a memory. And in the world of React, we call that state. Remember our little formula from the beginning, v equals f of s? Well, state is the s in that equation. It's the data that a component needs to remember to do its job. And here's the crucial part. Whenever that state changes, React just automatically reruns the component. The view updates itself. You don't tell it how to change, you just change the state, and React handles the rest. So how do we give a component this memory? We use a special feature called a hook. The most common one you'll use, by far, is useState. When you call it, you get back two things in a little array. First, the current value of your state, like the current count, which starts at 0 here, and second, a special function to update that value. You call that function with a new value, and boom, React triggers a re-render. Now, hooks are incredibly powerful, but with great power comes, well, a couple of simple rules, and you really have to follow them. Rule 1. Always call hooks at the very top level of your component. Don't stick them inside loops, conditions, or nested functions. Rule 2. Only call hooks from a React function component. That's it. Follow those two rules and React will work perfectly every time. Break them and you're gonna have a bad time. All right, so our individual components have memory. They're like little islands that can manage themselves. But how do we get them to talk to each other? How do we build a connected archipelago, a full application? That's the next stop on our roadmap, understanding data flow in React. The rule for data flow in React is simple. It only flows one way. Think of it like a waterfall. Data always flows down from a parent component to a child component. Never sideways, never back up. This is called unidirectional data flow, and it's a core principle that makes your app so much easier to understand and debug. And the way we pass that data down is through something called props. Okay, that brings up a good question, right? If data only flows down, what happens when two sibling components need to share the same piece of information? Well, for that, we have a really important pattern called lifting state up. It's exactly what it sounds like. Step 1, you find the closest parent component that they both share, and you lift the state up into that parent. Step 2, you pass the state down to both children as props. And here's the clever part, step 3. You also pass the function that changes the state down as a prop. That way, the children can still tell the parent to update the data. You know, if you understand these 3 core ideas, components, state, and props, you are firmly on the modern React roadmap. You've got the fundamentals. But it's worth taking a quick look back at how we got here to really appreciate why these patterns are the standard today. React's history really tells a story of simplification. Things started out a bit more complex. But as you can see, there's been this clear evolution towards simpler, more functional ways of doing things. The huge turning point was back in 2019 when they introduced hooks. That was a revolution. All of a sudden, these simple function components could do everything the old, clunky class components could do, and it totally changed how we write React. And I mean, just look at this comparison. It says it all, right? On the left, you've got the old way with class components. Lots of this keywords, constructors, lifecycle methods. It's a lot of boilerplate. On the right, the modern function component with hooks. It does the exact same thing, but it's cleaner, more direct, and just way easier to read and understand. It's no wonder the whole community jumped on board. But this whole idea of re-rendering brings up a really important question. If we're constantly changing state and components are re-rendering all over the place, why doesn't the whole thing just grind to a halt? How is React so darn fast? The answer is React's secret weapon, something called the virtual DOM. See, talking directly to the real browser DOM is slow and expensive, so React doesn't do it unless it absolutely has to. Instead, it keeps this lightweight copy, this blueprint of the DOM in memory. When state changes, React figures out what needs to change on its virtual copy, compares it to what it was before, and calculates the absolute most efficient way to update the real browser DOM. It's this reconciliation process that makes React feel incredibly snappy. So let's zoom out and look at our completed roadmap. These are the key landmarks you need to know. 1. Build everything out of reusable components. 2. Manage interactivity and memory with state and hooks. 3. Pass data from parent to child using props, always in that one-way flow. And 4. Trust that React's virtual DOM is working its magic under the hood to keep everything running at top speed. Master these, and you've mastered the fundamentals of React. So now you have the architectural blueprint. You have the map. The only question left is, what amazing user interface are you going to build first? This is Developer Roadmaps. Map your path. Build your career.